Hello, I am James Snell. First of all, thanks for all coming out. This is very exciting. I'm more excited about the rain. I'm from Central California, Central Valley, California. Rain is a myth. It doesn't exist there. So the water falling from the sky is a wonderful thing. Thank you. Thank you. So I am James Snell. I am IBM's technical lead for Node. Sounds more exciting than it is. It's a lot of herding cats, and there are a lot of cats at IBM to herd. I also on the Node TSC. There's a couple acronyms, TSC and CTC. If it's confusing to you, it's even more confusing to us that are actually on it and trying to figure out what it all means. But TSC is Technical Steering Committee, and CTC is the Core Technical Committee. TSC really is the kind of umbrella overall, all of the different projects that are within Node, the Node Foundation, and CTC focuses specifically on the core of Node itself. So 2015 was an interesting year. It started out rather interesting. At the end of 2014, we had this little project called Iojs start to emerge. It came up with its first release, 1.0, in January. And it had some interesting results, right? The events leading up to the Iojs fork, just to be honest, led to a lot of uncertainty in what was happening with Node. What its future was, how things were going to continue to evolve. And what we started to notice is at IBM, because probably about 3 years ago, IBM really started embracing Node, taking a look at it and figuring out, hey, we could use this too, and our customers can use it. Let's figure out what really interesting things that we could do. But when we started to see the things that were happening in the community, we had the same kind of uncertainty that you guys did, that everyone else did, that was where, what was happening here. We did note that there was a ton of excitement and a belief that Node could be even better, but it was just not clear where things were going to go. So in January of 2015, I was given 2 directives by my manager. She called me up, and the first thing that she asked me to do was figure out how to help. IBM is a user of Node, right? We have a lot of different places where we are wanting to make use of it. And knowing that there were these issues going on in the community, but also issues in the code that needed to be resolved, we needed to figure out how we could insert ourselves into that and help the community and actually help resolve a lot of those issues. So just become a contributor to the project. The second directive was figure out how to bring Node and Iojs back together. It's actually a much more difficult problem. I'm an engineer. I like to sit down and write code all day. Right? I don't like to do all the social community stuff and deal with that, actually talking to people. It's a wonderful thing. So we had to figure out, what are these issues that needed to be resolved. It became clear that the primary issue between Node and Iojs really wasn't the technology. It was the community issues about how decisions were being made. I sat down early, as in January, February, around that time. I sat down with Michael and Bert Belder and quite a few of the other kind of core contributors, had quite a few phone calls, and we just sat down to talk about what these issues were that led to Iojs coming out in the first place. Everybody was very passionate about the technologies. Everybody was clear that Node was moving in the right direction as a technology, but how those decisions were being made was a problem, right? We started to see a number of issues where contributor counts were going down, the commits were going down. It was having a real effect on the technology itself. The solution became very clear. And this is not a new problem. IBM has seen this before. This is why we are such huge advocates of open governance, and we've done this across many different projects. Todd Moore, one of our representative on the Node.js Foundation board, has said that this open source and open governance is part of our DNA. It's just because we have done this so many times and seen this pattern play out, the solution became pretty clear to us. Node needed open governance and an open community. We needed to be able to open that up more so that decision-making process was much more inclusive. This is exactly the road that Iojs has started down. So with all of the issues that, and all the uncertainty that Iojs brought into the market, it was probably one of the best things to happen with Node despite that. Okay? Open governance means that all technical decisions are open to anyone. Anyone who wants to contribute, anyone who wants to participate in those conversations can, free of any single vendor control point, and free of having to go through this kind of technical decision process. Rod Vag, the chair of the TSC, and a friend of mine at NodeSource, had created this model called open source. And really what this is that all decisions are made by the people who are willing to contribute. Anybody who wants to contribute can and can have a say in what's going on. That's really what we wanted to get to within Node. There was a challenge, however. While Iojs had moved to this open governance model, and a significant number of technical advances had been made within Node, the platform had become unstable. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. We'll see exactly why that was. But things started to move far too quickly. The focus became more about landing those commits than on providing a stable platform for businesses to grow on. So the challenge to bring Iojs and Node back together is we needed Node's dedication to stability with Iojs's velocity in open governance. I think we succeeded. We'll go over some numbers. Hopefully all of you think we succeeded as well. Within the past 11 months, we've had 6 major releases of Node, which is kind of mind-boggling. If you wonder how we came up with that math, since we jumped from 0 to 12 to 4, I'll go over that in just a second. But there's been a ton of activity going on. Here's how we got to that point. Every Iojs release is considered a proper Node release at this point. So we were at Iojs 1 in January. We also released Node 0.12 in January. We had Iojs 2 in May, Iojs 3 in August, Node 4 in September, and Node 5 in October. And all during that, we had 64 minor and patch releases throughout that same period of time across all our different branches. It's been a busy year. It's been kind of a tiring year. During that same period of time, we launched the foundation, developed the new open governance model based on what Iojs had pioneered, which was fantastic. Grew the GitHub organization to over 400 members. Just Node Core alone now has over 850 contributors going back over its entire history. We launched the new long-term support plan, which I'll talk about in a second. We launched the updated website. We now have 16 working groups that have already been chartered or in the process of being chartered, focusing on a variety of different aspects of the project. Each one of those work groups is an autonomous unit that can basically that takes charge for a specific aspect of Node. One of the most important of those work groups, one of the newest ones, is the new Diversity and Inclusivity working group. Personally, I think it's one of the most important ones. It's really geared towards growing that base of contributors within Node to make it much more diverse, to make it much more inclusive on a global scale. And that's definitely something that I think that should be everyone's goal. And I would really love to see more happen within that working group. So it's going to be awesome to see that continue to evolve. Now, Node Master in version 5 supports the latest ES6 features. Fantastic. Node 4 scored an A+ on SSL Labs with no configuration, which means that out of the box, Node is one of the most secure platforms available. We've made significant improvements to performance, benchmarks, testing, CI. I think something like, I think it's like 27% of the commits for this year have just been on documentation and testing improvements, which is pretty significant. We have a brand new CI environment, which is giving us coverage on all of our major platforms. And it's been a significant amount of work to get to that point. We even have a farm of Raspberry Pi devices that are sitting in Rod Vag's garage that does all these builds. So it's pretty impressive. We've also, like I said, major improvements to the documentation, including a significant effort to internationalize the documentation into many different languages. I kind of lost track of how many different languages how many efforts we have right now. So some were afraid that the foundation would slow things down. That has not happened. In fact, I think it's gone quite the opposite. There was quite a few conversations early on in this when we were talking with the Iojs folks and bringing everybody to the table. There was this question of whether this foundation thing would just bring us back to the way things were before, where it took 2 years to get from 0.10 to 0.12. Obviously, that has not happened. So we've maintained the velocity. What about the stability? I remember having quite a few conversations with Scott Hammond and a few of the others from Node about, okay, great, we have this open governance model, we have this open decision-making process, but how do we make sure that Node stays stable to the companies that are actually, building their business on Node? Right? We can't have this where we're making breaking changes every month, right? It has to be stable. It has to be solid. In October of this year, we launched the new long-term support program, which basically comes down to this. Twice per year, we have a stable release. That'll come out in April and come out in October. The one that comes out in April, 6 months later, will roll over to our what we call the LTS program, which means a total support cycle of 30 months. So that stable branch, from the time it's cut to the time LTS ends, will be about 36 months total. That's every other one with the overlapping LTS on those. So if you are building, say, on version 4, the next LTS will be version 6. Version 5 is what we'd call an interim release. It's designed really to let the ecosystem know where we're going, know what changes are coming, but it's not necessarily something you want to build on long term, right? You can, if you're willing to take that little additional risk. But version 6 will roll over into LTS next October. The version 6 release should come out in April. The intent here is to give you something stable to build on, right? This is a clear schedule. You won't have to know, well, is it going to be 1 year or 2 years before the next Node release? Or is it going to come out next month? We just don't know. This is very clear, very succinct in terms of when these things are coming out and when you can rely on these branches being supported. The key thing to keep in mind with those stable branches is that there are no breaking changes. We will not change the APIs there. We might add an additional API here and there. There's some commits that we're getting ready to land here soon-ish in version 4 that improves kind of the debugging and tracing within Node. And some of those are add some additional APIs. But in those stables, we're not going to be removing things. We're not going to be changing the version of V8, which is on a 6-week stable cycle, right? Which is kind of insane. But it's really designed to give you something solid. So stable, reliable, predictable schedule with a commitment to long-term support is absolutely essential moving forward, and we hope that it achieves the goal and gives you guys something stable that you can build on. The impact has been unmistakable on this. Put some numbers together. This chart's interesting. Before the line in the middle, that's all the commits in master in 2014. Everything on this side of the line is all the commits in master since Iojs was released in January. We've doubled the average commits. We are back at the levels of commits we were at in 2013. This chart's even more compelling. It kind of shows that. In 2014, the commits dropped to the lowest point they had been since Ryan Dahl created Node in 2009. And you really see that in 2012, 2013. You start to see the effects of those community issues start to come into play. But look what happens in 2015 with Iojs, with the launch of the foundation, with us bringing everything together. The commits are back up to where they were. Again, we can also see the same thing if we look at the additions and deletions from GitHub for 2015. Now, to be honest, most of those are V8 changes. It's been massive. There's been a lot of churn there. But I mean, it's really unmistakable what's been happening in the code itself. Even more exciting than is what's happening in the ecosystem. And I don't want to go into this too much, because I know Ashley's going to be talking about these numbers a little bit more. But all of you have likely seen this chart. Sorry if it's a little bit hard to read, but these are the module counts in NPM. And this top line that keeps going up, those are the module counts for NPM compared to everything else. And if you look at that chart, most of the growth that's been happening has been in 2015, right? Even more exciting, though, to me, is this chart. And these were put together by Lori Voss at NPM. Also, one was shared on Twitter. The other was part of his November talk. Right here, at this point, January 2005, notice the line goes almost vertical on the monthly downloads, right? That corresponds almost exactly to when Iojs and 0.12 were released. The second inflection point, right there, right around July 1st, is when we were able to announce that Iojs and Node.js were coming back together. So the impact on the ecosystem itself has been huge, even more so than on Node Core. It means that all of that uncertainty and doubt was finally resolved, and the community really got behind what was going on. So there's more work to do. These numbers, again, thanks for NPM for putting these numbers out. 38.1% of NPM users are on version 4, which is actually quite amazing to me since it's only been out there for 2 months. We've already got almost 40% of the users that are on it. But there is still 60% of the users that are on V12 or lower, with the majority of those being on 0.10. It's important to note that 0.10 support, the long-term support for that, expires next October. The support for 0.12 expires next December. All right, so you have a year if you're still on these platforms that you really want to start moving towards version 4 and beyond. We also, want to continue growing these contributors, the contributor base, right? So, if you're using Node, we want to hear from you. Help us out. Help us with, whether it's just putting together the roadmap. It doesn't matter. Any commit doesn't matter what size it is. If it's just even changing typos in the documentation, it's an extremely valuable commit, right? Every commit is valuable, and anyone who wishes to contribute, please come and help us out. So on behalf of the core team and myself, this past year has been an absolute blast. I've been having more fun than I have, my 14 years at IBM. Even more exciting to me, though, than what we've accomplished over this past year is what all of you will accomplish with Node going forward in the years to come. So I'm excited that we're here. I'm excited to see your sessions, and that's it. Thank you.